up, YouTube? This is your girl Megan from the Hood Astro Queen. Welcome back to my channel, to all of my returning subscribers. However, if this is your first time joining me on today, hello, welcome. It is here that we use information from celestial bodies to help us gain a better understanding of our favorite celebrities, world events, but most importantly, our damn selves. So do me a solid, thumbs up this video, click that subscribe button to join the family, and yeah. So today, I'm coming to you guys yet again with another celebrity birth chart reading, this time on none other than Joe Budden. This will be a revisited because I have done a reading on him before in the past. This may have been maybe 2 years ago or so. But every so often, based on certain things happening in the headlines, I like to go back for a little tune-up, touch-up, especially for some of my more newer Astro family members. So, as I'm sure many of you guys may have heard, Joe Budden has been getting a lot of bad press lately, okay? He fell out, or actually fired, his podcast co-host, Rory and Mal. I don't watch the show. I actually used to watch it when it first came out, and then when a lot of those colorist retweets and Twitter posts surfaced of him and Mal, I just got turned off and I never tuned back in. So right off the bat, Joe has been a clown to me. Mal has been a clown. This entire podcast, it was also kind of hard to get into because I felt like it was just a bunch of niggas sitting around making a bunch of inside jokes. And it's like, yeah, so I digress. But anywho, he fired them. Allegedly, he had some really shisty, shady contract deals going on. And as his celebrity and star power increased, he started networking, making deals, securing brand deals. And allegedly, the contract that he had for his co-hosts / friends, okay, these are supposed to be his real life friends, were pretty shitty. And, then he fired them after they got into some kind of disagreement. Y'all can fill in the gaps if you want to in the comment section. But point is, they've parted ways. It's been very public. Rory and Mal have gone on to create their own podcast or Patreon telling their side of the story. And it just sparked this kind of avalanche because after that, a young lady who actually worked on one of his networks in another podcast he was doing came out and accused him of sexual harassment, basically stating that on air he was making very inappropriate comments to her, said he wanted to sleep with her, that he groped her or was doing weird inappropriate things while they hugged, making her uncomfortable. She was scared of retaliation and so on and so forth, okay? And so I wanted to take a look at Joe Budden's chart just to give some astrological context to these events. So Joe Budden was born on August 31st, 1980. Okay, in New York. And so here's the thing. Joe Budden is actually a Virgo. And if you ask me, he's a dark-sided Virgo. He has his sun at the 8th degree. The number 8 can create a very controlling person. And when placed or attached to a sign like Virgo, right? Virgo can also be controlling, especially if they're dark-sided. These can actually just be assholes, right? That's very dark-sided Virgo. And although people in general, regardless as to what sun placement you have, a lot of people do have the capability of being on that narcissistic spectrum. But dark-sided Virgos in particular can be, right alongside Leo, can be some very notorious narcissists, okay? Just unforgiving narcissists. And Joe Budden always had a way about himself, especially with that Virgo sun, right? Where, a lot of Virgos, especially because his sun is conjoined to Mercury, you could look at that as him being into radio, podcasting, but him also being the type of guy who has a way with words, right? Where, and I noticed this with a lot of Virgos, even the ones who aren't dark-sided, okay? They are typically, even if they're not traditionally educated, they can be very excellent self-teachers. So they're self-taught and they have a way of presenting themselves that is very well contained, right? Very articulate, a way of expressing themselves where, they like to be very concise, about getting their point across, or they can be very particular about how they word things, how they frame things, how they engage people. And to a lot of people, unassuming people, this automatically translates into a person being very intelligent, which a lot of Virgo, I would say the overwhelming majority of Virgo placements are, like personal Virgo placements, are incredibly intelligent. Well, here's the issue with that. That narcissistic factor, okay, for the dark-sided ones, could definitely come across and easily translate into a personality that feels like they know more than the next person, almost like a know-it-all, which is actually reinforced considering that Joe's Sun and Mercury are both conjoined to his Jupiter at the 18th degree. Now, the number 18 is a very challenging number, and it can translate into some very negative personality traits in terms of a person who could just be very mean. So it could compound that 8 energy, a very mean, tyrannical person, a person who can even be cruel. That number 8 energy is also about like punishment. So very sadistic in how they engage people. And they could also have a superiority complex. And a lot of times that superiority complex is a front for what could be an inferiority complex, which a lot of Virgos also have as well, but people with prominent energy, 8 energy, can have. And so Jupiter is one of those planets, especially Jupiter in Virgo, where it's like it can create a person who kind of feels like they know a lot, right? So conjoined to his Mercury, his Sun, you could look at this as a know-it-all. You could look at this as a person who just kind of even overinflates themselves in terms of their knowledge and their how helpful they feel like they can be, which is also very, very Virgo. Jupiter is one of those planets where just because it technically and traditionally is a quote unquote good planet, right? A benefic planet, it could still have some negative attributes. And a lot of those attributes pertain to a person biting off more than what they can chew, or a person who can have this grandiose kind of where you're gassing yourself up, where you're believing and buying into your own hype, especially conjoined the Mercury and the Sun in Virgo. So where you just kind of think you are this person, this grandiose person, and you have these grandiose ideas. And a lot of times these people fall short, they fall flat on their face, and it can be a humbling experience. Virgo is very humbling. So, they can rise to very high heights and then fall very, very quickly. And with the Sun dealing with your claim to fame, dealing with the entertainment industry, right? One of the biggest angles of Joe Budden's commentary, which is that Mercury energy, right? His Sun conjoined to Mercury, was the fact that he had this niche level of expertise as it pertains to like the industry, him being somebody who was a former rapper, which, by the way, I think I'm going to do a series on this finally, but connecting the influence of Mercury to the charts of rappers, because he has that Virgo energy checked off as well as that Sun conjoined to Mercury. So he has all of the telltale placements of a rapper, but nonetheless, he's also a Leo North Node with his North Node at the 18th degree. That number 18 once again, okay? That could also deal with bad business. The number 18 can deal with bad business attached to that Leo North Node, bad business in the music industry, the entertainment industry. And so with the ruler of his North Node, right, his Virgo Sun conjoined Mercury and Jupiter, you could look at this as to where he's positioned himself to be this kind of go-to person. Like he knows everything there is to know about the industry, but yet and still he could have ways about himself. He could have been on the receiving end of a lot of bad business, a lot of really negative personalities, but he could also be the type of person who could kind of, once again, sniff his own farts, kind of get too big for his own britches, and is likely to conduct bad business or act in a way that could be very selfish, right? Where it's all about me. That's very 18. And technically, as an Aquarius South Node, you could look at this as him having a podcast with his friends. A lot of Aquarius South Nodes do have a lot of karma tied into their friendships. These are people who, especially when were younger, could be affiliated or associated or attached to a lot of people, right? These are people who in this lifetime are technically supposed to be the star of their own show, whatever that may be. Okay, it doesn't always have to translate into like a celebrity standpoint. Most people actually won't be famous. But in Joe Budden's case, absolutely. So he is supposed to be like a one-man show in his lifetime. So technically, he's operating within his rights, actually. But as an Aquarius South Node, you have two facets. You have the Aquarius South Node that is very much all about their friends, who overly defines themselves by collectives. But yet still that Aquarius energy can breed entitlement as well as disloyalty. So, and the nodes, the way that the nodes work, they can actually kind of bounce off of one another. So by him being entitled and him kind of acting and operating in a way that is very disloyal to his friends, hence that Aquarius South Node, it puts him in a position where he's, catapulting himself into that Leo North Node energy and securing, once again, a lot of these deals, these business deals, and really making a way, or at least trying to make a way for himself within the industry. But as an Aquarius South Node, from time to time, those things can backfire, okay? Because a lot of Aquarius South Nodes could also find themselves in the midst of controversy in the process, okay? And this is also reinforced considering that he has his Uranus, which happens to be at the 21st degree of Scorpio, squaring both of his nodes. So you could look at this in one way, which could signify and reinforce him just being a very shisty, sneaky, conniving, underhanded kind of character towards his friends. But you could also look at that as him, and I mentioned this in the last reading I did on him, where Joe could actually find himself on the receiving end of where, when people's star brightly shines, especially if we're talking about Leo North Nodes, when they start shining a little bit too brightly, they attract a lot of hate and venom from other people. So when you square that Uranus, okay, in Scorpio, when it squares that North Node, that Leo North Node, as well as that Aquarius South Node, it could breed lots of jealousy, hatred, envy, not only amongst his peers and friends, but other people in the industry, other people in Hollywood, which, more than one thing could be true at once. So yes, Joe Budden is a dick. I truly believe he's a dick. He's an asshole. That's also very Aquarius South Node. A lot of Aquarius South Nodes, because they're naturally really detached from their emotions, they can actually come across very cold, right? And then in tandem with, all of that Virgo energy, that dark side of Virgo energy, they can be just grade A assholes, period. Point blank, period. And then the narcissism with the Leo North Node, and then the Sun can join the Mercury and Jupiter in Virgo. Absolutely. But, however, he could still be on the receiving end of venom in terms of people who see his success, who see the heights that he has reached in his career and where his career is going, and people in that same industry who are intimidated by it. Okay? It's a dirty game. It's a dirty game. And with Joe's Sun being parallel to his Pluto and Libra, a lot of his reputation and a lot of his face card is going to be contingent upon his connections. It's going to be contingent upon his relationships in the industry. And with Libra, of course, being the sign of open enemies, that's liable to turn on you. That's liable to take a turn for the worse. I also feel like Joe Budden is kind of conflicted in terms of what he wants. Like the idea he had for the podcast at the time that it was created versus who he thinks he is and where he is in his life, right now, I think could have been two different things, because you have to think about it too. Although with him being a Virgo is a sign of service. A lot of these people, especially with prominent Virgo energy, that Sun, Mercury, Jupiter, like to, be in more subservient positions, right? These are people who could work behind the scenes, the apprentice, the secretary, the assistant, so to speak. That 8 energy creates a need for, once again, dominance. And so does that Leo North Node for dominance, where I am the king. I'm the star of the show. This is the Joe Budden podcast. Okay, they came to see me. Okay, David Ruffin and the, what's their name? Shout out to y'all who caught that reference. But so I feel like in a weird way, Joe might have actually hit that Leo North Node or activated it a little bit too much in a weird way. Or he could have really used that Aquarius South Node once again to kind of launch him into that Leo North Node in a way that sparked a lot of controversy, which is also very on brand, on par with that Aquarius South Node. These can be very controversial figures, also reinforced with his Uranus at that 21st degree of Scorpio squaring his South Node, okay? Where he could get just a lot of bad press, or he could do things that could really put people off, you know? But once again, all of this could even just tie up into him being a very disloyal person, a person who is out for self, very manipulative, sneaky, and all of those things, right? Just bad for business. This is also reinforced with his Taurus moon conjoined the Chiron, especially considering that they're squaring that Leo North Node. That could be a person who is just bad for business, a person who is money hungry, greedy. With it squaring his Aquarius South Node, these are people who could, be greedy at the expense of, once again, their friends with that Aquarian energy. So, in no way am I exonerating Joe Budden as a person. I actually think he's a horrible person. Even as we trend towards like these sexual assault allegations, anybody who's been paying attention to anything over the past few years knows that Joe Budden is abusive and has been abusive to women. Incredibly abusive to women, okay? Not only does that Taurus moon conjoin the Chiron create a man who could essentially view women as property. Taurus is one of the most misogynistic signs of the zodiac. So in a man's chart, right, a lot of men with, specifically, we're talking about Taurus moon men, the really dark-sided ones, especially, with Chiron in the mix, he probably is a dark-sided Taurus moon. They view women as property, something to be owned, right? They could have very dated, conservative views towards women. It also doesn't help that his moon and Chiron are opposing that Uranus at the 21st degree of Scorpio. That could deal with where he just flat out objectifies women, even like sexually, right? Where they're sex toys and objects to him, where, he could be very sadistic and cruel to women, like with no remorse, no afterthought. That also kind of highlights that Aquarius South Node energy too. A lot of Aquarian South Nodes can be like that because they come from a lot of past life experiences where a lot of them probably weren't even real human beings. Like in this lifetime, he's supposed to, be loyal, use his feelings more, use his heart space more, do a lot more heart chakra work, okay? To be more human. He's supposed to be humanized in his lifetime. But he could have a really difficult time doing that with women. Then he has his Venus at that 22nd degree of Cancer. That number 22 is the degree of controlling or being controlled. And then it's squaring his Pluto. So once again, that's a very abusive man. That's a womanizer, especially with Venus and Cancer. These are womanizers all day long. These are men who could just be flat out abusive to women, which, I remember hearing that he beat the baby out of a woman before. Like he stomped on her uterus, which it's not lost upon me that Venus in Cancer can't deal with the woman's womb, her uterus, where he just gave her a free abortion with it squaring that Pluto in Libra. Like, we're not going to act like that's not a thing. But that could also be a man who's capable of forcing himself on a woman sexually. But even like verbally too, though, with his Jupiter in Virgo squaring his Neptune. Okay, you could also look at that as him being a habitual boundary crosser, a habitual boundary stepper within the workplace. So even when it comes to people who work for him or work under him, once again, that Virgo energy is very like, assistant level or, I'm his coworker or I'm his subordinate type of T, where he can just, take the lines and blur them. But that could even have applied to the way he approached his podcast with Rory and Mal, right? Where the lines were very blurred. Are we your peers or are you our boss? Which would be very Leo North Node. So I feel like he kind of entered the arrangement on some Aquarius South Node. We're all equal. Aquarius demands for everybody to be on the same level, where we're all, this is a community thing. I even think that Rory and Mal reported that they took some of their checks, right? The checks that they got via YouTube, which is also very Aquarius South Node, where he started off just doing this like online straight up YouTube platform with his friends where we're all equal, and they're taking their money and they're putting it back into the show. That's very Aquarius. Like, okay, well, we all pull our money and our resources together and we put it back into the show, and we're all just kind of looking after one another. And then one day he kind of inadvertently woke up when that Leo North Node came calling, and people in the industry who normally he was estranged from, or because the Aquarius South Node could deal with isolation. So maybe he spent all this time being isolated from the real heavy hitters in the industry and these corporations, which is also very heavy 8 energy. They came calling, and he just woke up one day and wanted to be that big boss Leo North Node, and started acting like it and feeling himself and talking to people in a certain way and carrying himself in a certain way and asserting his authority and dominance in a certain way. And things just came falling down from there. So, if you want to be the king, you got to be the king true and set the example and be a leader in all regards. I think that's the issue, the way that he went about doing it. So, but like I always say with Aquarius South Nodes, you have to expect disloyalty from them at some point. It's the sign of disloyalty. Okay. It just is what it is. There are people who are naturally going to base a lot of their actions on what's convenient in the moment, especially if there is a lot of notoriety that could be at stake, a lot of notoriety, a lot of attention, a lot of fame, and a lot of power at stake. So, and once again, that 18 energy that he has in his chart on his nose, that Jupiter, even that 8 energy tied to his sun, can make him just a very mean, nasty ass person. So, and one who's power hungry and selfish and inconsiderate. So I don't really know what people expected from Joe Budden. I'm not surprised by any of these revelations. So on that note, I'm gonna go ahead and conclude the reading. You guys drop down in the comment section. Let me know what you think about this whole scenario, and I'll holler at y'all later. Make sure you practice unconditional self-love so that you can love others. And until the next video, I'll holla.